Welcome to the show today. Today I have Chris Walter on the show, and he's the head of commercial IT Europe at Mylan. And I'm very excited to talk to you today. We had a great conversation last time, and I was super curious about what you actually do within the company. And it's very interesting, the kind of role that you have, the kind of work that you do. So very excited to have you here, Chris. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Daniel. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you.
Great. So let's dive right into your story. Tell us a little bit about, so who's Chris, and then also a little bit about the story, maybe some interesting moments that shaped you along the way that got you to where you are today.
Sure. Who's Chris? Chris is based in Switzerland today. I'm what you would call probably a corporate roamer. I've lived in the UK, I've lived in Ireland, I've lived in Germany, I've lived in Australia, and now I'm in Switzerland. I live here with my wife. Children are all grown up, spread around Europe and Australia still. My background really is that I've come from humble beginnings, I think I would say. I started off life as an apprentice, as an electronics engineer. So I come from the hardware side of the business from a very young age. I was an apprentice for 5 years and worked my way through all aspects of a commercial small business, from the technical side through to sales and marketing, through to stock keeping, through to finance. Gave me a wonderful grounding in how businesses run. I've applied that to how I run information technology. How I've got to where I've got to really is a journey of decisions. I started off, as I say, in that small company and made the decision to move to expand my scope into a much larger organization. So I went from a company of 45 people to a company of 300,000 people, AT&T. A major move made on the basis of needing to expand into different technologies and be upfront and not be designing it myself. From there, really, I stayed in software engineering and software manufacture for a number of years, always customer facing, until in 1998, I came across into what I now call end user computing, end user IT, which was a bit of a shock, but brought with me all of those commercial outlooks that one needs, I think. So my role really now for Mylan is I'm a business technologist. What does that mean? It means I have a strong understanding, firsthand and learned, of how our business runs and the processes that I'm trying to enable. I then work back and translate that back into technology and technological solutions that enable our business users to execute those processes as efficiently and effectively with as much market impact, both in terms of cost management or in terms of revenue management, in terms of customer service, whatever it is, as possible. And really that's my role, is to be that bridge between our business and our IT who develop and deploy technology solutions.
I'm very curious. So first of all, thanks for sharing that. I find that a really interesting role because it's as you said, it's the bridge basically. It's the one that glues or connects the pieces together. And I want to talk a little bit more about your drive, your motivation. You know, what triggers you? What is it that drives you? What is it that gets you up every morning to do the work you're doing? Is there a red thread? Is there a common line there?
Yeah, I suppose there's two. On the personal front, I've always been somebody that needs to make a difference. I've never been one to be, and maybe that's because of the very small company I worked at, where if I took the day off, the department stopped because I was it. And I suppose I was brought up to, in a professional sense, to make a difference. And I feel that grounded me in taking accountability. Now I feel, why do I get up every morning? I need, in this company, what motivates me about pharmaceuticals is the fact that every day, and at the COVID-19 time at the moment, it really brings it home very, very strongly. We make a difference to people's health every day. Somebody, it doesn't matter whether it's COVID or not. The point is, people's health matters. And the company I work for is able to get product onto the pharmacist's shelves that can be dispensed to people. That gets me up every day. And that's really motivating for me. On the technical side, I get up every day because I love technology and I love enabling. I suppose I love people. I'm a people lover from that point of view. I have a lot of green energy. If you think about the DISC analysis, I have a lot of green energy and I like to please people. And there's nothing better for me than delivering a solution that allows somebody to do their job more effectively, to do it more easily, or to make an improvement in just the cost or the top line or the bottom line that we do. I love to see the reaction when something goes well. And if it doesn't go well, I want to know why it didn't go well and improve for the next time. Not blame. I hate blame cultures. Blame cultures are a waste of time and energy. What you need is constant review of, could we do it better? Why did that happen? And then let's improve.
Very interesting. I mean, I like that you sort of like brought, I guess, 2 or even 3 pieces together into one overlaying theme. And I guess there's you already got a little bit into it, I feel, but I want to dive a lot more into your journey now, talking about specific lessons learned, specific best practices you had along the way. And it could be anything, as long as you feel it is important or has shaped you or has basically taught you an important lesson along the way. Maybe you can elaborate on 1 or 2 specific lessons you learned along the way, and then we can talk a little bit about the context or maybe a specific case that came up with those lessons.
I think one of the lessons that I learned was when you're bringing a change, if we talk about change management, as a business technologist, I suppose my underlying grounding is or underlying philosophy has got to be around change management, because you're taking a number of different emotions and trying to bring them together to enable you to move forward with a technological change that you're trying to make. And so one of the biggest lessons I learned, to be honest, was understand the change that you're doing. The emotional impact of that change. If you can understand the emotional impact, the technicalities will be dealt with. The emotional impact is where you will succeed or fail. I was given a very nice, maybe a bit of advice many years ago that said, Chris, in any project, you're always going to have issues. It's not the number of issues you get, it's how you deal with the issues that makes you successful or makes a failure. And I think how you deal with it's a how. That's an emotion. So for me, that was the biggest learning that's shaped my approach to major change management, especially when I'm integrating or implementing new technology.
That's a big one. I like that. I like the focus on change and basically the understanding of it. Can you maybe dive into 1 or 2? Do you have specific examples where this really came out to play? This lesson learned. Is there anything you can share a bit more on a deeper level? Because I'm super interested in that.
Yeah, let me go back a few years when I was still in Australia. One of the first business transformations that I was doing there was to implement a new ERP system. Now, as we all know, ERP systems touch every part of the business at the back end and a good chunk of it at the front end as well. But this was really a situation. I had a plant, I had a warehouse, as well as a commercial operation. In those days, I was looking after the whole breadth of IT across the manufacturing through to selling, the whole piece in Australia. And so we were running this project and we were really looking at what is the impact of this change on the individuals. And I was working with an HR lead there who helped me hugely in really understanding the couple of key areas of change. One is, who was the top dog with the old system, but is just going to be a nobody in the new system because it's a level playing ground? What is the emotional impact on them, feeling today everybody comes to me, they talk to me about it if it goes wrong. Tomorrow it's going to be a case of, oh, I won't know. And so a big area that we worked on was identifying those key people that need to be still top dogs in the new system, and really focusing on them to bring them a little bit ahead. Couldn't do it too much because it was a brand new system and big one. Bring them ahead of their colleagues so that they could be the first point of contact. They could continue to be just that little bit higher than the others. And the balance, which is the second lesson, is don't forget, whenever you put something new in, there are new people to bring in. If it's only waiting for somebody to move on and that person's always been the number one person, well, that's not very motivating for maybe your younger or newer members of staff. So we tried to balance that with who are the new people on the block that really took hold of this technology as well. Because a lot of technology, and I talk about technology, but really I'm talking about a culture. And that's we could talk about that as a second lesson in the environment we're in today. But we balanced across, so we had these established people and we had the new people, and we brought them together. And then they formed our real change managers and our change champions to actually take and really get the enthusiasm going for this change, because it was a major change. We were going from a very, 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 very old system to a very up-to-date, cutting-edge system. So it was a huge change and much risk to our business if it went wrong. But because we did that, I think we were pretty successful in getting that change through. The other one, which is very relevant, I suppose, to today, is the other two areas of culture that I'm working on, which is really how we interact. We have a nice expression here in Mylan called connect, communicate, and collaborate. It's taken on a new meaning and a new cultural change on many people, like this Zoom meeting that we're in today. We have, because I'm across Europe, we've been used to working with people in a remote sense, but not with your colleagues. As soon as everybody went home, suddenly everybody's working remotely. That's a huge change. And it needs a change, not just an email, for example, that gets flying around. It needs to go into the new way of looking at how do you collaborate more effectively. If you're working on a file that you're trying to get updated, no, you can't go into a meeting room and just work on it on a whiteboard. It has to be a different way. So there's a lot of change now going on to try and cement or to use the current work from home. We had to make a cultural change and do things differently. So it's another good example of where, yes, I talk about technology, but it's all about people. It's all about bringing them on the journey. In this case, it had to be a fast journey, so that they moved away from just sitting next to somebody and working through to how do you set up these remote meetings? How do you collaborate real time on a document? For some people who may see this, that may be, oh, we've been doing that for years. Our company hasn't. We've been very much more face-to-face, meeting orientation. And now we're having to champion that change and make it a cultural change that will stick, is the plan. Time will tell.
I mean, very, very fascinating. Like, two things come up to me, and one is the topic of digital collaboration in a sense, because, you know, I guess like sending emails and even doing video calls, that's not difficult, right? That's easy. We've done that before. But as you said, like people, you know, and we've been collaborating virtually before, but now it's not, and now the teams that were together before are now also remote. That's an interesting one because, you know, there's certain levels of collaboration, I guess, you know, or certain depth of collaboration. And at the very deep level where, you know, there's a lot of creativity required and a lot of sort of like emotional understanding of people and just like really feeling certain things out of people, you know, creative workshops and, you know, things like that. They're not that easy just with tools, because it requires a lot more than just the tools. And the other thing that is interesting is sort of like the change in people, because I just had a conversation with a guy this morning who's been doing a lot of work in the operational level of change management, but on a people level, because like he said, we're always the guys being called when, the transformation project failed and nobody's adopted it. We're always those guys, and we're called then to basically come in and answer the question, why did it not work, right?
Yeah.
And the answer is often, first of all, obviously because people haven't adopted it, but then why is that, right? And that's a really fascinating one to me as well. Maybe just on that topic, I'd really love to elaborate, or you get your perspective on it. Sort of like when we're already going into the next, talking point anyway, which is transformational change, transformational leadership. So what I'm really curious about, I want to start it off with a very specific topic, which is how do you, so you have a transformation, you have a change, right? Change program, whatever you call it, but something is changing and it's a big change. And and if for it to work, people need to adjust, people need to adopt. People need to adopt a new set of behavior, a new set of attitude, whatever it may be, a new set of tasks as part of their job, whatever it is. How do you truly get people to actually adopt change?
Number one, obvious answer, it's a process. Obvious answer, the reason I say that is because I believe that there's two elements to it, or a few elements to it. Key element is to identify your change champions. Who are those adept people that welcome change? I don't know if you remember, I don't know if I'm allowed to do advertising, but one of my favorite change management, I'll call it philosophies, is Who Moved My Cheese? And for me, the real power behind that philosophy is the four characters. Those who are totally resistant to change and will never change. Those who will, after they're persuaded enough, will eventually change. Those who really welcome change once it's here. And those that really change before change is really needed because they can smell it coming and they're off. Number 1 and number 4 are the ones to manage, are most difficult to manage. The two in the middle are where really our focus is, especially number 2, which is those that need a lot of change. So my view is that you take your number 4s and maybe number 3s and you say those people are the ones that are really adept to change. How do they become, how do you identify them? Usually speaking, when we're looking at a business process, you go through a number of interviews, go through a number of workshops. They will bubble to the surface. You can hear it. And as I said right at the beginning of this, I have a heart for people. Makes it difficult sometimes in some areas that I operate in, because having a heart for people, I'm sorry to be blunt, but can be difficult at the higher levels of the organization. They're much more fact and analytic driven, rather than people like me that are more heart driven than that. But so I think you can sense when somebody coming to you can hear it in their voice, in the enthusiasm, and then you target those people to be your change champions, because they are the people. And I'm not talking technical now. I'm talking about, if you want to call about the people that are going to use this change or be impacted by the change. Use them as your ambassadors or your change champions into the rest of the team. Because the closer and more respect and more understanding that team members have of each other will make the change be able to be communicated more effectively. They will put it in words that I could never think about. They would use examples that I couldn't think about because they're closer to their colleagues. So I think it's more of a process of change which cascades or waterfalls, or however you want to say it, permeates through the organization. Take what I said right at the beginning, though, that you also need to be aware and do the technicality of, let's just look at the audience, let's look at the people who are impacted. Where are those people in those 4 categories, potentially? But more so, where are those that are the ones that are going to be most impacted, that were the absolute adept, the ones that have to get through a bazillion things a day, and this is going to slow them down. The ones that really don't want to change. We've done this for 30 years. Why do we want to change it now? So those, you have to do that as well, but then augment that with these people that they know and work with, who can then enthuse them. So you can actually build the fire or fan the flames, whichever analogy you want to say. That's what I do. That's how we try and approach it. And the other key one then is for the whole group to keep them informed, to keep them part of the journey as much as you can. I agree the core team is usually one that's on the journey, but then everybody else should be brought along the journey as much as they can. For example, I'm running myself trainings here in Switzerland for the local affiliate and the regional team that are here. Because again, humility is a big part of my leadership style. And if I've got to use the system, I should be able to show other people how to use it. It's no good me saying you should do e-signature and not be able to do e-signature myself. And if I know how to do it, well, I should share it. And that's what I'm trying to do. And I've already, through that, I've identified 2 or 3 people that have come back to me and said, oh, really interested in this, really interested in that, using them to actually then drive the enthusiasm for this new way of working into their departments.
Really, some really interesting things stand out here for me. The first one is on a personal level with you, because there's a certain set of passions or talents that you have because of your character, because of your DNA, I guess, because of being very people driven, very heart centered. There's a certain, DNA that is there, right? So the way you go about that is very much in alignment with your DNA, which is to me very interesting, first of all. And obviously it makes sense, but then not everybody goes about it that way. And it's easy to not go, about it in a very natural way if you're too head driven. So that's one thing. The second one is actually, identifying, or as you said, they bubble up, like seeing those people and understanding those people as a way to understand everybody else, because they're the closest you can get to everybody else. It's sort of like they are your translators at the end of the day, or they are, they're the bridge to really understand how are they talking about things. Like, because if you go with a message to somebody, but it doesn't resonate with their wording or with the way they would say something, it doesn't make any change at the end of the day. That's one thing. And then not only understanding through those people, but then having them as you said, ambassadors, I think is the word you used, having them as ambassadors there to be sort of like your spokespeople or their own spokespeople at the end of the day. Because if they believe change, is important, needs to happen, you sort of like ripple it out. It just reminds me of, what is it called? The curve of diffusion of innovation, something like where you have the innovators, the early adopters, and it's basically, you find the innovators, maybe the early adopters, and you allow them to help you, make the ripple of the change throughout the whole organization. So that's really, really interesting. And I want to zoom out a little bit more towards how do you approach change? So if there's a big change that needs to go from A to B, right? There's no operations manual. There's maybe certain principles or things like that, but do you have a certain playbook in a sense that you use? Are there certain principles, or maybe a little bit more structured than just, principles or values, but maybe a certain playbook, maybe a framework that you use for yourself to actually approach change, or change projects or change programs?
Yes. So even though I've said that I'm a heart-based type leader, I also am very process orientated. I believe strongly that if you just do things as it comes to you, you can never actually track back to why something didn't work as you expected it to. And for me, that maybe sounds a little contradictory, but it's not really, because in order for me to improve, or for a situation to improve over time, you have to be able to apply the same steps to what you're doing, to then identify at each step if there's an issue or a way to do it better or differently. So absolutely. But the principle of what we've just talked about sticks. The principle is we need to identify the right people to be on the team. We then need to be able to communicate and to give them enough information that they can light the fire with their colleagues and to bring everybody on the journey. So when there's a major change coming, that is the starting point is, let's look at this big picture. What is the vision of where we're trying to get to? Step number one. once we've got to the vision of where we're trying to get to, we can then almost reverse engineer it to a point. Take this as high level stuff now. Here's the vision we're trying to get to. How do we reverse engineer that to get to that point? What are the big steps we need to take? And then we'll drive that down and down to the point where we understand what the overall plan is. Once we understanding, we is an interesting question, because it depends on the change that we're talking about. But I would expect to identify key stakeholders from day one. As an IT professional, I don't run any IT projects. The team that deploy infrastructure, networks, video conferencing, servers, they run IT projects. I don't run IT projects. I run business projects that have got an IT enablement to them. So from day one, I need to know who owns this project, who wants this. Because if nobody wants it, well, it's not a project. I'm done. So first point is, who's the key owner? So once you've got the key owner, and then they can identify who their key people on this project is, then you have your starting point to do everything I said. Where are we trying to get to? Key owner, what do you want? What are you trying to achieve with this? Once we know what we're trying to achieve, so the why, we then decide what is going to deliver that output, so the what. Then the tricky one is always the how. How are we going to get from A to B? We know why we're doing it. We know what we're going to do. We just need to figure out how to do it. And that's where the detailed planning comes in, whether that be the change management plan, the communication plan, or the technical plan. All those three need to exist for us to be successful. And that's the playbook. It sounds, there's a lot of detail to that, but that's the playbook.
I love that. I love how you went from high level to the very granular level, and everything in between, because there's I feel like there's people who sometimes only see the highest level and they cannot relate to anything else, and the other way around as well. And I think it's incredibly valuable to be able to have both lenses and even be able to wear them at the same time. So I find that really, really interesting. There's really one more question I have, which is, a lot more high up in the sky or like far into the future. But I always like to ask that, which is, so let's imagine you're 80 years old now and you're sitting in your rocking chair and you're looking back at your life and, how the world has changed and what has been changed, basically. So if you're in that moment now, 80 years old, and you look back, what is the kind of change that you would want to see looking back?
On the personal front, because I was thinking, if I think about now, right now we've been through a once in 100 years plus situation in the world, and one of the things that I hear so much about is the sense of community that people have gone back to, even though we're isolated. Which sounds oxymoronic, but it's not. When people are alone, they want to know other people are there. When things are normal, they're too busy or something. And we drifted away from community. We drifted away from thinking about others and their needs. And so when I'm 80 years old, which isn't so far away, I'd like to see and look back and say, in 2020, when we had that horrible pandemic that was just absolutely dreadful, look at what came from it. We returned to, when I was growing up, community. We returned to people thinking about the older people like me when I'm 80, who maybe can't get out to the shops and knocking on the door and saying, can I get you any shopping today? That's what I would love to see. As a technologist, I love technology. I have done since I was 8 years old. So I'm very privileged and blessed to have been in a job that's been my hobby the whole life. It's been wonderful. But it's been wonderful. But I always worry about the insular society. I've got a few of my son's friends, particularly, who stay through till 4 a.m. every morning on the games consoles. That worries me. My own children were never allowed a computer, or even didn't even get a mobile phone until they were like 14, because I worry about the insular society. Whereas people being put into isolation has used the same technology to go back to community. There's a lovely, lovely irony there.
I love that very much, going back to community. And I think it's really what's happening around the world, or at least the world that I'm seeing, from my perspective, is that's actually really happening, and it's happening very quickly. It's happening overnight. It happens without persuading people or incentivizing them or any of that. It just happens,
Yeah.
and it's what is fascinating to me then, is why is that happening without all the effort and all the that. It's just happening, and it's fascinating, and I love that, looking back from that point, that change. So Chris, thank you so much for being here, for being on the show, for sharing your wisdom. Really appreciate it. Below this video we're going to link to your LinkedIn profile as well, so people can connect and reach out. And thank you, Chris, for being here. Really
That's been
appreciate
an
it.
absolute pleasure. I've enjoyed talking with you, and I wish you to stay safe. And as these restrictions go, let's see if the prediction of the communities continues.
Thank you.